You're listening to Dramas Over Flowers with Saya, Anisa, and Porma. This episode was originally recorded in the middle of 2022 during a live stream event where we spoke about writing in Korean dramas.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about storytellings in K-drama. With our various experiences combined, we have some thoughts on how K-dramas are written, and that's what we want to talk about today.
That's right. So, first, let's just jump into what are the kind of structural elements that go into crafting a good story?
Premise and plot, which are kind of similar, although not the same. You've got character, you've got dialogue, and then you've got sticking the landing. But we also want to distinguish between the idea of premise and concept, which are not necessarily the same thing. And Anissa, I think you had a really good breakdown of how they differ. Would you like to share it with us?
Sure, I can share with the class. So I feel like the premise is literally just, what's the story about? Here's what's the basic sort of plot summary kind of that you start at. Whereas the concept is more, you have high concept dramas where it's a time travel show, or it's a supernatural show, or it's a fantasy show. And that is not genre necessarily, but it'll be a specific concept for that show's world. Whereas the premise is a girl met a boy and they worked in a hospice and shenanigans happened and there were tears.
I wonder which drama that is.
And everybody fell in love with Ji Chang-wook again. Sorry, okay, that's a tangent. But there you go. That's kind of my non-professional, off-the-cuff definition of both. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely. At first, when we were talking about this, we kind of came up with them as almost the same thing. And then as we talked about it, we realized that actually they're quite distinct. So it's always a premise is much more sort of bare bones, whereas the concept is kind of the ceiling, right? It's
kind of high level. Yeah.
And the reason we're starting with this is because Korean dramas, after all, have caught our attention and are now catching international attention because of the concepts they come up with, which are fleshed out, but also basically the what-if scenarios that all stories are based on. K-dramas excel at coming up with the most ridiculous yet the most nuanced version of what-if scenarios. And it's important to recognize that is a skill that K-drama writers have not just developed, but passed on through generations of writers, assistant writers, and then writers of the next generation. It's a really difficult honed skill, and that has kind of at this point I feel like it's at its peak. Every concept that comes out nowadays seems to be its most excellent form. There are, of course, at the end of the day, there are some times when we get tired of watching certain types of dramas happen because they fall into a rut. They become narrow, and it feels like we're watching too many similar things in K-dramas. And then we move into other C-dramas, or just we watch Western stuff sometimes, just as a break. But in terms of concept, individual stories, when they are great, there is pretty much nothing that from other industries that can compete with K-dramas. So yeah, concept. So we're starting out with this because it's a really difficult thing to master, and somehow K-drama writers seem to have mastered it.
And a drama does rest on its concept, because if you can't figure out the rules for that concept, then you can't translate that into an execution that works. You can't translate that into world building. You can't translate that into characters who do things that make sense. So, if you get it wrong at that sort of DNA level, that premise and the concept, they're the DNA level of the story. Just the same way that the writing itself is the one thing that will, if you don't get the writing right, the drama can't be right, basically. no matter how pretty it is, no matter how good the acting is, it won't save the drama.
Right, because then it'll just collapse. The whole world of the show will just collapse in on itself. And what you mentioned, Borma, about how sometimes we get tired of, them doing the same things over and over again. I think that's also like one of the it's like a pitfall and a benefit of K-dramas is that like they're very sensitive to tropes. Sorry, not tropes, trends. And I think like Korean culture is very sensitive to trends in general, but like in this case, so something will catch on and it'll be trendy. And so then everyone will do it. And I think most media like industries are like this. If something gets popular, then they're like, oh, how can we replicate this? And because of this sort of compressed timeline in which K-dramas happen, you'll see like a really successful time travel drama that takes like one angle and then like you have a whole bunch. But the nice thing about that is also then like there's always people kind of looking to see what the next trend is going to be. And so they're like always coming up with like interesting and creative concepts. And as you said, now like they have the money to actually take those to sort of the high level that the writers and the directors actually imagining it to go. So that's fun.
That is the best part, like having the money to like bring your vision to fruition. So right now we're talking about the execution of the concept, which is where I feel most other industries fall apart. I don't know how many of you guys would be aware, but recently there are a couple of movies out of Bollywood which has had like the biggest budget that Bollywood has ever invested in movies. One of them is not actually a Hindi cinema product. It's called RRR, and basically the entire world is going a bit nuts about it. The reason I bring it up is because it's a big budget production, and it does the visual aspect amazingly. It's gorgeous in terms of like the cinematography, but also just like the VFX. It's amazing. The story is insane, and in part, I think because of the insanity of the story,
Good
it's
insane
doing really
or bad
well.
insane?
I didn't say bad insane because I'm really used to this genre of, and it's not supposed to make perfect linear sense. It's not supposed to be reality. It's its own form of fantasy. But if you go into it with like the lens of, hey, this is freedom fighters in an independence movement. Why are they fighting with tigers? That's the entire thing falls apart. But yeah, I ended up liking RRR too. But initially, I was not a huge fan. However, the reason I bring it up is the silliness of it. Despite the silliness of it, one thing it does right, which I think other Indian cinema, like big budget ones, kind of fall apart on, is in terms of concept and world building, it does some convincing world building. And the reason I am bringing this up is because very recently another movie was released, Brahmastra, which again has like the big visual, the VFX, all of that stuff. It's a huge success right now. I'm pretty sure it's going to keep making money. I'm quite happy it has been created because I'm a fan of fantasy. However, the story is ridiculous. The world building is non-existent. And even when you're putting a huge amount of money, K-dramas, when they get that kind of money, they first work on the writing. They first work on making sure that the foundations, the world building is as packed with, like cement that will really hold. Even if like the top portion of the structure is a bit wobbly and like the final, like the tip of the thing might not exactly be perfectly steady, but like the foundation holds. So your belief in the world holds. And that seems to be like the priority. Yeah.
Although there are times when a drama falls apart because its world building isn't solid.
Yes, absolutely. It's not a perfect formula, but the reason I'm comparing it with like the Indian movie industry is because very recently the Indian movie industry is starting to get proper amount of money. I can't even like do on the fly numbers in my head, but let's say where just imagine what this number means. But like let's say a movie used to be for like 100 crore. A couple of years back, now they're getting 5 times that budget to do a big movie. It's the budget has become pretty huge, which means that visually it looks gorgeous, but the skill level of the writers hasn't exactly gone up to match. Whereas I feel like with K-drama writers, it's the writing that has been honed for years and has been the focus of production far before the money ever caught up to,
That is
help them bring it, visually.
That is true in the sense that in sort of the world of K-dramas, it's like the superstars are the writers, right? It's much less common to have a superstar director. And I mean, actors are kind of their own whole layer of what they do. But like in that production level of like creating the world that the actors inhabit, the superstars are the writers 100%. And
right. It's like writers are queens in this industry. I was going to say king.
Like, I mean, think about it. If you're asked to name a writer or any writer or 10 writers, we can immediately come up with 10. Can you come up with more than 3 directors? I don't think I can.
No.
Not without thinking really hard. But like writers, I can keep telling you about.
The only
writers.
one I know about, and that's because he did Alchemy of Souls recently, and he's done like a bunch of dramas that I've loved, including Secretary Kim. But yeah, that's an honest Park Jun-hwa. I'm so sorry. And that's like the only one at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think Bong Joon-ho counts.
Very true.
No. He's not a drama director.
No, I mean, film is another.
Film is where the director...
He writes his movies too.
Films
So
are where the directors are the superstars. But in dramas, the writers are the superstars.
I was also recently thinking, because Sai and I both have done a detour into C-dramas in the last few months, how writers are not that well respected in the C-drama world. It's not like they're not at all. They're definitely better than other industries in other countries. But compared to K-dramas, like where K-dramas, like you said, they are the superstars. With C-dramas, a few writers are really well known. The rest of them are completely just not. And when the writers are well known, chances are that they're getting like a ton of internet hate over something really silly. Like some reviewers somewhere compared their writing to a great playwright and said that, hey, because they did I'm talking about Dream of Splendor. The writer got criticized because she retweeted, so to speak, reshared a reviewer's opinion that her writing was more progressive than the writing of an admittedly great playwright who did something like hundreds of years back, which would be the case since, time, hundreds of years.
Time has passed. Right, exactly.
And she got so much hate.
I was talking to... Yeah, I remember that. I was talking to my professor, she was on my committee when I did my master's, and I've continued to stay friends with her. I went and spoke to her class. But she got really into K-dramas, after I did my, defense of my master's, which was about K-dramas. She went and watched Crash Landing on You, and I saw her last weekend, and she was saying that she noticed that she's Taiwanese American, but her family's from mainland China, and she was saying, the acting is much more high quality in K-dramas than in Chinese dramas. And I mean, I that's her judgment. I don't know. I'm not haven't watched a ton of Chinese dramas, so I wouldn't be able to judge. But I was saying it's also interesting how there's the expectations from the audience who demand certain things, and depending on the industry, they're demanding different things. And so the industry also kind of responds to that. And so I think with K-dramas, one of the things that has been developed, but also that people will expect and kind of comment on, is the writing, is the acting. If somebody doesn't act well in a K-drama, they are going to get dragged for months on the internet, by variety shows, by their peers. It's just a thing for Korean dramas, right? So whereas I don't think that that's necessarily true for Chinese dramas, that there just isn't, even kid actors, nobody expects kid actors in Hollywood movies to be good. They all are terrible. I mean, for the most part, they can't really act, and that's fine. They're kids. There's no expectation. But in Korean dramas, all the kid actors are already fully developed acting geniuses. And if they weren't, they would probably get comments, which is bad. I mean, you should never judge children. But I'm just saying, the cultural expectations for these different industries is different also. So I think there's that sort of audience participation in a way that kind of shapes what people pay more attention to.
Agreed. The expectation of skill at all levels of production, from performers to the creatives, are super high, and anything less than excellent is just utter failure. So I guess Asian parents.
And I was thinking about this. Yeah, and I was thinking about this in the context of, so if any of you all are fans of Throughline, NPR's podcast about tracing history and telling stories that kind of trace through history and have an impact on today. It's an amazing show. Highly recommend. But they recently did, their latest episode actually was about the rise of Korean culture globally. And they talked about how Korean dramas and K-pop were sponsored by the government in a deliberate effort to have, global power and influence by the former president Kim Dae-jung in the early 2000s. And so if you also think about it as this sort of nationalist project that you are consciously exporting to the rest of the world, right? And so then there's this pressure that it has to be really, really good. Whereas that's not necessarily the same kind of pressure that all entertainment industries are facing. They're just like, we're making stuff, we're making it for our own people, we're making stuff that people will enjoy, hopefully we'll make money. Like that's, it's just not on this same, there isn't as much kind of writing on it, for example.
Yeah. Shall we move on to how writing affects world building or genre writing?
Can I just read out this one comment from Abdul, who says, we can even advance those expectations to looks. Even in comparison to Hollywood, the Hollywood demands for flawless skin and perfectly chiseled abs are insane because it functions as a symbolic export of the nation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what that made me think of? And I know this might not be the best example, but... So I'm going to go very South Asian here. But, how parents sort of traditionally would raise their daughters to be very dutiful, and they kind of didn't care what their sons did? It's because the daughter was the export, right? So you're kind of raising daughters-in-law. So dramas are kind of like the national daughter-in-law. You're sending them to another home. So they have to be absolutely perfect. This is a very horrible example.
Wow. That's very deep and very, very Asian.
That's true.
Whereas the home stuff, the things that are for the domestic audience, they don't have that same level of quality control, I guess, would be one way of describing it. But yeah, that just occurred to me as you were describing the export nature of dramas.
Your example reminds me of this quote by the Hong sisters when they were being interviewed about their drama, The Greatest Love. And they said this thing that I absolutely loved. So the main pair of the drama were basically mismatched in the eyes of the people. They were like, one was a Hallyu star, Dokujin, and the other was this like a sort of has-been pop star. And she's trying to, through her, to wound her way through variety and trying to regain her popularity.
She's trying to stay in work, I think.
Yeah, basically stay relevant and earn something. And the two are really badly matched from like the perspective of fans. So the writers said that what we wanted to do was make the nation the mother-in-law who disapproves of this pair.
Right.
And I
was thinking the exact same thing.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
So good, so smart.
This is what I love about writers. Like they are so well aware of the problems of their society. And this level of awareness and willingness to not just tackle the problem, but like say it out in a clever way. Not just like, listen, I'm all for protests and saying things bluntly, but I think
it's the Jane Austen skill,
made,
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. A point is better made when it's said in a clever, memorable way. And this is just so good. Yeah, what were we talking about? I think we
I think it's time to move on to the next section, right?
So how do you think that writing is affected by the genre that you write in? Like, is genre writing different to, like, I don't know,
absolutely,
sort of everyday dramas? In what ways would you say that they differ?
First of all, I don't think there is any everyday drama. all K-dramas are part of some genre or the other, and that's deliberate. K-dramas more than any other industry.
Like a fantasy world and a non-fantasy setting.
But even like the non-fantasy will be a very specific genre with its own genre rules. Is it a young adult set in a college? Is it just, youths entering office for the first time, rookies in an office? All of these have like their own very specific formulas, and audiences recognize formulas and the shorthands that the writers use, and that's also deliberate. I'm pretty sure somewhere out there in the K-drama writers world, there are handbooks for every one of these genres with exactly the rules that guide each of them, because there is no other way that the moment a drama opens, the audience immediately recognizes what genre this is, like even if you've not seen the trailer, because the shorthands start coming at us immediately, right?
Are there handbooks, Parma? I don't think anyone gave the extraordinary attorney writer that handbook. She said she didn't know about it.
I think every drama writer comes up with their own handbook, isn't it?
I think it's passed down like a Gurukul thing.
The thing is, like they train, right? Like rookie writers train under experienced head writers, right? Because you'll usually have a team of writers, and even if all those writers don't get credit for the drama, there's like a head writer who's kind of the star, and then she'll have these underlings who help her with like scripting and just like editing, things like this, like sort of the grunt work, but she's kind of the main engine behind the writing. And so if you come up it's like an apprenticeship, right? You learn how to do things the way that people before you have done.
Absolutely.
Not to keep ragging on Extraordinary Attorney Woo, but like because the writer didn't come through that sort of system of apprenticeship for drama writing, and she was just going from writing one film and then coming to write one drama, she just kind of wasn't able to sustain, because it's a marathon to write a drama, whereas a film is more of a sprint, right?
Though, having spent some time away, like after the finale of EAW, and getting all our frustration out, I'm wondering if it's fair to just blame the writer for the weird turn the second half took, because that does seem to happen with all dramas. And I think we should also talk about that, why second halves inevitably derail. Yeah.
They don't all. The thing is that like the structure of a K-drama is such that in a 16-episode drama, episode 8 is a designated turning point. The question is, how well do you turn? Or in which direction do you turn? So this is the thing with K-dramas. I actually have like a 70% written essay about this, but which just started last year and I've never finished. About K-dramas and the rule of 4.
I'll do the screen caps, please.
I have to finish writing it. Basically, like K-dramas are they are more of a 4-act story than a 3-act story. And what you have is the first 4 episode, the first block of 4 is your kind of setting the scene, and it sets up the conflict. And then the sort of 5 to 8, that second block, that brings you to, like, it completes your first conflict. Like, you go through that conflict, and by episode 8, you reach, like, a climax. And then you have a turn in the story where, like, your sort of your second arc, it's a 2-arc story. K-dramas in general, and I'm not sure if this applies to all of them, but certainly in complex thrillers, I actually was studying a bunch of thrillers. I was watching a bunch, and I ended up sort of watching them in a studious way. What were the dramas? It was Beyond Evil, it was Good Detective, it was a bunch of stuff that I was watching at that time. And they all did this. So the first arc completed at episode 8, and then episode 9 began its second arc, which was that long arc story is there from the beginning, but there's a short arc and a longer arc. And so your second half tells a story that sort of levels up from the first half. And yeah, I guess it depends. The thing with like genre is that genre itself can provide a level of intensity and conflict that really helps the story. And in thrillers, in sci-fi, in fantasies, in something that has a really sort of tension, a natural tension just in like its very premise, that is thicker than the tension of, say, an office rom-com.
Or in its concept,
Yes.
might we say. Sorry to be a pedant. But that's such an interesting point. I'm not like as steeped in thrillers as you are, so I've never noticed that. But it's true with rom-coms too, right? Like how many times do we talk about the episode 8 kiss? And even if it's not a kiss, episode 8 is generally the one that kind of you take the turn in the relationship where both of them have acknowledged their feelings to each other. And so while the first half of the drama is about them slowly understanding that they like this person and then gaining the courage to confess their feelings, the second half then is about once they have acknowledged their feelings, what are all the other conflicts that are going to stand in their way of their happy ending? And it's them working through those. Then you also
have the episode 12, that requisite episode 12, very serious, the big moment of the show, right? We all have those.
Right, the breakup moment.
In a rom-com or romance or a melodrama, that does tend to be a breakup, but in a thriller, that would be something different. And then you have...
So I think romance writers, not to go back to books, but I think romance writers call this like the dark night of the soul.
Yes. Yeah.
Where like you get close to the end, everything's going great, and then like the ex comes out of the woodwork. Or there's like some moment of like noble idiocy where the one of them breaks up with the other for their own good. So I mean that dark night of the soul can also be applied to other genres, I think. Where you just like read that last most difficult moment before the resolution.
So in terms of genre, what do you think that each genre relies on more for its sort of its best execution? For example, like I'd say in a thriller, the plot really matters the most. What about in other genres? Like character, dialogue, what about the other elements?
I think slice of life relies very heavily on character development. Romance is also sort of rests on character development, but there also has to be like chemistry, and that is so hard to know whether that's going to be there before you start. What do you think, Parma?
I don't have clear thoughts on this right now. I'm still going over it.
Well, let me throw a drama name at you. How about Romance as a bonus book?
I just want to say rom-coms also rely heavily on dialogue. I think dialogue is so important for rom-coms more than for any other genres.
I agree. For instance, I generally tend to think if you take the crime genre, like even crime can be split into two. One is like a procedural, like heavier drama like Beyond Evil, where dialogue really matters. The other is, what was the one that we just watched, Saya? The one with...
Again, My Life?
Oh, was it?
Like the initial portion that we loved. Dialogue wasn't really why we loved it.
Yeah.
There is something about stylized action that certain dramas just...
That's like the adrenaline carries you for a while. Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Right.
And that's one type of crime. And then the other type of crime drama is Stranger, where if the dialogue wasn't just the best... And of course, the atmosphere created by the writing and just the directorial ability. But yeah, so such good quotes that come out of like each interaction. So yes, but romance, you're absolutely right. Like I can't imagine a romance ever hitting me, or even like me being able to complete a romantic drama if the dialogue didn't have a certain amount of sugar rush or depth.
So let me ask,
and that's partly writing and it's partly the actor's execution of that writing, but you have to have both in order for those to have those moments where you just like one of them delivers a line and you're just like on the table, on the floor, in a puddle, it's just like dying. Sorry, Saya, go on.
That's exactly the point I will sort of roll myself into, which is the first half of Something in the Rain, Pretty Nina. The dialogue was amazing. Everything about the first half of that drama was just on point. So what went wrong?
That's a whole other live event that we won't. I think
in terms of writing. I think
that the first half of the drama sets up something, or at least like promises something, or seems to. I think there was some genre confusion where like it presents like a rom-com in the first half. And then the second half, it becomes this very cynical character study that is trying to make a point about
the futility of it all.
I don't know, the futility of being a woman or like the depressing nature of life. I'm not really sure, but like that's not what it kind of like implicitly promised us in the beginning.
This is also a drama I've thought about quite a bit. And I think that this is what the formula of K-dramas, this is where the formula of K-dramas kicks in, as in both helping audiences develop expectations and enjoyment, and also is the reason for most of our disappointment. Because the formula of a genre and the shorthand that communicates with the audience, like between the creative team and the audience, we are understanding what the intention of the creatives is pretty early on in the story. Even if we don't know the entire story, we have a general idea that this, I don't know if this is going to be a happy ending or a sad ending, but we know what the intention is. If there is a bully early on in the drama, we know that the bully is going to have comeuppance at the end of the drama. Pretty Nuna started off as a story where there were two bullies in our heroine's life, her mother and the workplace harassers, multiple of them. Just the situation that she was in. Her relationship with her friend wasn't the healthiest either. And the idea was that we are going to see resolutions that would be satisfactory, because the genre we were watching this in, which is basically the romantic, but like dramedy. It's not exactly romantic comedy, but it was like the dramedy genre. We thought at least that we would have closure. But that is where, like, even though the shorthand given to us was that it's getting there, that is what we are heading towards. As you said, Anisa, they changed the genre in the final quadrant, the final quarter of the story. And that hurts, because what we were expecting, and that expectation is a promise made to the audience, is, I mean, I understand artistic freedom and all of that stuff, but that promise is terribly important when you're creating a relationship of trust with your audience. And yeah, so that's like the other side of K-drama formulas being so well established in the audience's mind.
My diagnosis of this drama is actually, like, I think watching Extraordinary Attorney Woo really cements the problem with both of these dramas, which is that they wrote what should have been a film as a drama. Because you can have that kind of ending in a 90-minute, 2-hour film, and you don't feel like the contract hasn't been broken, right? Because you go into a film with different expectations. And if the story of either of those two had been in, like, you know, a 1.5 to 2 hour film format, you would have gone away from that feeling quite satisfied. Films, sometimes their function is to sort of give you a vignette of a situation. They don't necessarily promise resolution. They don't, like, they're meant to be like this sort of standalone work of art. They're not meant to be like street art, say, for example. They're not something continuous. Whereas, and I just looked up the writer again. This was apart from One Spring Night, which they did after this. Or is that what it was called? I think it was called that. Which, by the way, I think was sort of the correction of, like, it was a fixed version of Pretty Nuna, right?
However, had a lot less of the rush, but was probably, you know, in the latter half was, definitely
So this is interesting. So a film writer that doesn't come through the pipeline of drama writing can still learn to write a drama, but they sort of have to be allowed to have their bad dramas as well, I guess, because, you know, you write bad dramas in order to write good dramas, maybe. Though we still have to go through them, which isn't ideal.
If only we knew ahead of time which were the learning ones. We could just skip. I mean, but we're getting a little bit afield of our point.
I want you to talk about Vincenzo.
You know, I think what I really there are so many things that we loved about Vincenzo. I think we've talked about them ad nauseum. You know, it was just firing on all cylinders. The music, the directing, the writing, the acting, the casting was so spot on. And so it was so funny. I think what impressed me the most about it, despite it having so many things that were good about it, is that it never betrayed that premise and that concept that it gave us in the beginning, that you need a devil to take down a devil. And that's what you get, you know? Song Joong-ki's character, I mean, I'm not going to spoil the end of the drama, but like what Song Joong-ki's character, kind of who he is and what he promises to be in the story at the beginning is what you get at the end. And you don't get that without any character development. It's not that he never changes and he never develops. There's so much character development for like everyone in the story. And yet at the same time, it doesn't do that thing that a lot of, I mean, this isn't really a revenge drama. Although you could argue that
it's almost a heist drama in some ways, right?
Yeah, but a lot of revenge dramas do this, right? Where like the person who's taking revenge is like vowing to do all this stuff, and then at the end it just becomes a very toothless kind of. And I mean, I know that that's a point of a lot of revenge dramas of like revenge is actually bad, so you shouldn't do it. But at the same time, like I just really respect Vincenzo for kind of taking its concept to its logical conclusion instead of kind of like having this really amazing premise and a really kind of daring thesis statement and then kind of just like noping out at the end and taking the conventional route, which it didn't do. And it could
throw one more drama name into that ring, which is actually quite a recent drama, and I actually just finished it last night. Dr. Lawyer. I know it hasn't got a lot of hype, and I know that a lot of people have like criticisms of it, but that thing, the whole the way that the story stays true to who the character is, and it gives you an outcome that is very appropriate and fitting to the character that you've come to know. And like that's what makes the payoff so sweet, right? You're like, I still like I've been on this character development journey with you, and you have developed, but you also like you're fundamentally the person that I thought you were, if that makes sense.
Yes. Instead of having a lobotomy and pretending that that's character development, or instead of not having any character development and pretending that you told a satisfying story, which was what happened with Pretty Nuna and or Something in the Rain, and also Extraordinary Attorney Woo to some extent.
I think they both commit the same crime. And again, we have spoken a lot about this, but this is, I'm just going to say like 2 sentences on it. The problem with the characters in those 2 dramas is that they sort of pretended that they were evolving, and then they did an about face at the last moment, which sort of threw out everything that had happened in the previous episodes. And you're just like, but why did that happen? And so then you end up with these characters who you don't understand their motivations, you don't understand why they are doing the things they do, and you're no longer rooting for them. Like, you can root for villains if you get them, right? And like, can I just say, Shin Sung-ruk in Dr. Lawyer, he's such a show stealer. He is such a show stealer. He's so good. And yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah, he's always so good, but he just plays a villain like nobody else. The thing is,
it's not even necessarily a villain. It's like the ambiguity that you put into a character. That is the level of skill you need to write a truly ambiguous character. And again, Parama, this is what we were talking about in Arsenal Academy, which is an episode that hasn't come out yet, but it will come out. And we were talking about a book character as well, Jen. That ability the writer has to keep you with the character, even when you're not sure what side they're on, and whether they're going to betray you or not. But that's real skill. And yeah, I mean, that's probably a genre thing though.
I know. On that note, like, I wanted to mention another Shin Sung-ruk drama where he is actually he's not the antagonist, he's a protagonist. I don't know if I want to call him the villain, but this villainous character, or one of the antagonists, who's played by An Bo-hyun, he is written that way, right? Where, like, I mean, yes, part of that is always going to be the actor's performance and whether the actor can carry it off. But he's written in a way where, like, he never, even though he does a lot of bad things, you feel for him. You understand him. You can sympathize with him. And you feel sad for him, you know? And that's a really well-written villain when you can actually see where this person went wrong and kind of feel bad for what happened to them and why they turned out that way, even if you still want justice to happen.
This is Kairos, right?
Yes.
Kairos, yes. Sorry, I thought I mentioned it and I did. That's Kairos. Highly recommend Kairos, by the way. It's a really
kind
good
of
show.
like I think what really separates K-dramas from everything else is that they know how to write a sympathetic antagonist like nobody's business. Like there are times where you're like, the villain isn't even the villain. They are occupying a villain role, but they like you're with them. And it's such a skill.
Or even like a more nuanced anti-hero lead. Joe mentioned Beyond Evil does that with Lee Dong-sik as well as an ambiguous lead. And even like the shows that kind of do that anti-hero thing, it gives you a more interesting take than just here's a really bad man doing bad things, but you're going to root for him because he's the main character, which a lot of American TV shows really leaned hard into in the late 2000s.
Can I talk for 2 minutes about Heartless City?
About what?
Go for it.
Heartless City.
Heartless City.
Yes, absolutely.
I've been texting these guys for like weeks about Jung Kyung-ho. So I finally watched Heartless City about like literally 10 years late. And oh man, one, Jung Kyung-ho, his performance is insane. And the other thing is you start this drama and you don't know who is the antagonist and who is the protagonist, right? So the ambiguity of the characters is done in such an expert way. And what I found really interesting about this, though, is because I was reading about this and I was going back to discussions that were happening at the time as it was airing. And like the K-drama landscape in 2013 was very different. So a lot of the discussion is about how this is one of the earliest anti-hero dramas that K-drama does. And like the rules are so interesting. I can't talk about it without spoiling the end though. But like for example, the evolution of the anti-hero trope from a drama like Heartless City to a drama like Vincenzo or Beyond Evil. It's just like, yeah, it's really interesting. I will talk more about this later.
So basically, here's your Saya's giving you a homework assignment. Go watch all those shows and compare them.
It's just like who a hero is allowed to be, right? What kind of person is allowed to be a hero has changed between then and now. Like we are allowed to have the Song Joong-gi at the end of Vincenzo in, was it 2020? 2020, that you couldn't have had in 2013. And I just find that really interesting. And I don't want to spoil you the drama, so we'll talk more about this another day.
Yeah, I think another earlier anti-hero drama was Lookout, also known as The Guardians.
That was 2016, I think, was it?
That was 2017.
That was so good.
It's later for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was disappointed by the ending, but it's one of those where like, just go into it knowing that the ending is kind of takes a dive off a cliff, but the drama is so worth watching.
I really loved it all the way through, you know.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well, for me personally, I was a little disappointed with the ending. But man, like Lee Si-young and Kim Young-gwang in that drama were just like blew me away. And Kim Young-gwang's character in that is
good.
So interesting. It's fascinating. Like it's his best performance, I think.
Would agree.
I'm going to read out Abdul's comment again because I highly agree, which is that he says there are times when you can legitimately hate a character, never root for them to succeed, and still think that they are amazing characters, like that scum weasel Dong Jae from Stranger. Guys, we just recently talked about
I'm
my
sorry,
love
I
for
love
this guy.
him.
Hateable, never want him to succeed, but can't take your eyes off him. I completely agree, Abdul. That is very, very true.
Yeah, I mean, you love him as a character, but you wouldn't want to like be in his orbit in real life, you know? So yeah, I think that's perfect example.
True. The other thing is that we all understand that antagonists are a reflection of your hero in a way. Like no matter how bad your hero is, the antagonist basically at one juncture of choice took a path that the hero just can't. And that's why no matter how bad he is still the hero. And K-dramas really, really understand what this mirror of characters means, which is why there is this synchronicity between these two people. Like I go back to something like I Hear Your Voice. with I Hear Your Voice, you wouldn't think that the villain and the heroes, in this case, our protagonists, have much to, much in common. That the villain is somebody who just rammed into a car and killed the father and basically terrorized two children trying to escape and is basically just insane. But then we find out in the story that that was his revenge for the grief he was feeling for losing his own family member. So much later in the story, when he inflicts that pain on both our protagonists at different stages, the choices our protagonists make after they deal with their own grief, they don't really go out for vengeance, and that is how they are better than the villain. At the end of the day, the villain's choice to take a life in vengeance was what made him the villain, and then basically pursue the children until adulthood because he's just that obsessed. But yeah, so those differences of choices and how well the writing focuses on it is why I think the villains are often so memorable in K-dramas.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned I Hear Your Voice, actually, because Park Hae-ryun is a name we cannot not mention when we're talking about good K-drama writers.
Absolutely.
And like she, among some other writers, just write these extraordinarily detailed characters, and they write them consistently through each drama, whether the overall drama is fantastic or not. I mean, I haven't watched Startup, so I can't really comment on that, but on her dramas that I have watched, there's the level of detail that goes into constructing her characters is really interesting. Do you guys have a favorite writer for character creation?
Mine are the Hong sisters, but I'll let Anissa go first.
For characters, I think Park Jae-bum is really up there for me. So is Park Hyun-sun. So Park Jae-bum did Vincenzo, Chief Kim, Fiery Priest. Park Hyun-sun she is not as prominent these days, but she did White Christmas, Alone in Love. I'm blanking on another one. I know there's another one of hers that I've really loved. Oh, Hello My 20s, 1 and 2. How could I knew there was something I was thinking of.
So
yes,
good.
I love her so much that I even went back. I even watched Four Gold Chasers, also known as...
I didn't like that.
I don't know what else it's known as, but
investigative agency or evasive inquiry.
Yes, I didn't like it. I watched the whole thing for her. I even went back and watched Miss Kim's $1 Million Quest from 2004, which is like this throwback old school drama with Ji Jin-hee and Kim Hyun-joo, and they're so young, and it's such a cracky story. Like, it's ridiculous story. Anyway, I love her. I love her dialogue, but I mostly love her characters and her relationships, and I think Park Jae-bum does this too, where like he creates a whole world of characters who A, feel like real people, and B, feel that that they're like, you just have this conviction that they exist beyond your screen. And of course, the master of that, not to forget, is our beloved writer of Maya Joshi and My Liberation Notes, Park Ji-yeon as well. She's amazing at that too.
I think my favorite for those elements is probably, she's a little, maybe the reference is a little outdated now, but Ha Myung-hee, who wrote, I mean, we're going to pretend Record of Youth didn't exist, but, oh, actually, no, we do need to talk about that. But the dramas of hers that I have loved have been, like, Doctors is one of my all-time favorites, Temperature of Love, which I rewatched recently and I have thoughts about. But, like, even when her dramas aren't perfect, the knowledge of human nature that is so clearly present in her characters just makes you, man, I want to sit down and have a conversation with her and ask her how she knows these people, because they are so, like,
The only drama of hers that I've watched the whole thing of is One Warm Word, and it's basically about like I think like no one has heard of this show, but it's really, really good, but you'll like be miserable while you're watching it, because it's basically about the fallout of this like extramarital affair. And like once it's over, how that affects like the two families. And you're so right. So it's like she's like
She knows things.
unearths people's hearts, and she's just like writing what she found in there, and you're just like, who are you? Like, what is this superpower? Yeah.
And actually, we do need to talk about Record of Youth because it was disappointing. And I think what I feel like happened in that drama is that she was trying to sort of produce a facsimile of her past dramas rather than writing a new drama. And if you rely on your on sort of copying your own work, that will not result in a good drama. And like you could see in Record of Youth, it was just so present there. Like there were lines that she was riffing from her past dramas where you were like, you're trying to create something that like the moment for it has already passed. You can't like create this now. Like for example, in Temperature of Love, I think Park Bo-gum was originally slated for that lead role that was in the end played by Yang Se-jung, who was perfect, by the way. But like it felt like the actors had been spoon-fed lines that weren't natural for them to say. They were just acting it out. And I know they're literally acting it out, but I shouldn't be thinking while I'm watching it that you're just acting this out. And the downfall of that drama was like very deeply embedded in the writing of it.
Oh, is it my turn? Okay.
Yes.
So almost because of nostalgia, the writers whom I love the best are the Hong sisters, Hong Miran and Hong Jung-yoon. However, I think most recently, the writer who impressed me was the writer of Be Melodramatic. I forget their name, Kim Yang-young. Be Melodramatic was just so good. It stuck with me so much. I have watched it way too many times that it's
so good.
It's a drama that breaks the K-drama formula and breaks it in a way that doesn't feel like a break. Like because there are so many meta references and because the relationships are done so well, it feels solid. In a way, Age of Youth did. Like it felt like it broke with K-drama formula and yet didn't feel unfamiliar. The storytelling patterns were just familiar enough for everything to work, even though it was a fresh way of writing. Okay, the other writers, like my favorites, the writer of the Reply series, as well as Possible Playlist. Though I don't think I can just take her name, Lee Woo-jung. I also have to immediately give credit to the director she always works with, which is Shin Won-ho. Because they seem to like do their best work together. And Lee Woo-jung is so good, especially with nostalgia material, but also just with like relationships with history, which is something that I feel like is a trademark of this writer. Like if this relationship has like a 10-year history of friendship or enmity, it comes out in like small moments and interactions as if like it's accrued. It's almost a habit in the character, and I don't know how she does it, but that's how it is. It's like small gestures and just like
you can feel the time and the history between these characters, and that's very hard to do.
It feels familiar, like because as if it's something that you would have with your own friends. Yet, just dramatic enough to be part of a TV series. There's like this fine balance, and she does it so well. The Hong sisters, of course, because hello, you're beautiful. That was my gateway. I cannot give them enough credit for creating something completely insane, even for that time, and yet something that just stayed. So, still stays with me. The thing that I love about the Hong sisters most is that a lot of writers write for their time. Like, as you said, like the K-dramas are very sensitive to trends. The Hong sisters are sensitive to trends. They address problems that are in society. But the issues that they tend to address in relationships tend to be something that doesn't go out of style anytime soon. I can't think of any of their dramas except for maybe Big, which was awful. Nobody watch it, please. that went out of style, like which you can't go back and
Woman
watch
Cozy,
now.
I'm sorry, that was also
Okay, I did not. That does not exist. Big was bad. Woman Cozy does not exist.
Yeah.
That was a crime against
nobody
nobody
can be good all the time. So, as Philly Joanne mentioned in the comments, and I wanted to bring this up too. So, Be Melodramatic was actually co-written by the writer, who doesn't seem to have any other credits that you mentioned.
She has
I
one
think her
more.
name is
She has Lovers of the Red Sky, because I remember watching it for her, like because she wrote it.
okay, Kim Young Young.
Kim Young Young, that's right.
She's also known as Ha-eun, so I'm not sure. But Lee Byung-hun is like a very famous director. He's kind of the star out of these two. He's done a lot of movies. So he did Extreme Job, 20, Cheer Up, Mr. Lee, What a Man Wants. So he's more well known in movies. And so I think what was really interesting about them working together on this Be Melodramatic is that like it's the story of a writer and a director falling in love, right? That's kind of the main story. So it's really, I love that they worked on it together. I don't know what kind of writing relationship they have, Philly Joanne. I don't really know much about the writing process for that drama, but like that's very cool.
No, but it's
maybe they're dating.
While we were watching Be Melodramatic, Philly Joanne, I had exactly the same question in my mind because I can see the director. Like you have a picture of the director rather, and he's relatively young.
He's young and cute, let's be honest.
Yeah, I was trying not to say that, but
Can I add one thing about the Hung sisters before you move on to the next writer?
yes, please.
So I think what's really special about the Hung sisters is that they have mastered each element of the storytelling process. But we also have such a long body of work to look back on theirs. So like one, you can see how their writing has evolved. But if you think about all of the things that we're talking about, like the premise, the concept, the characters, the dialogue, in the best of their dramas, every one of those is spot on. Like, and
I'll add one more. The meta.
Oh, yeah.
They're queens of meta.
And because there's that sort of intertextuality as well, isn't it? That they can self-reference back to their own works as well. But also the strength of this writing pair is that there is two of them. Like they are a unit. Like they are a writing unit. So like one writer can't get things right by themselves all the time, but that process of creation where you're bouncing ideas between each other, where you're able to pick out, I mean, I'm sure that relationship, that writing relationship allows them to pick out the weaknesses of the work because they're both looking at it from different angles. I mean, like one of the things that we find really interesting when we talk about like, we find talk about craft really interesting, whether that's like characters in a drama or whether that's the characters writing the drama, right? So like when we talk about our own work, whether it's whether we're producing a piece of writing together, whether we're creating a podcast, whether we're constructing an episode, the thing is improved by all of us working on it and chipping away at the things that one of us might will have an idea and we won't see the problems in it and the other of us points it out. Like the strength is in having not too many people, but more than one person in that process who can give you that kind of external feedback that you can't necessarily see yourself because you're so deep inside it.
Yeah.
Also, those people that you have in that process are also people whom you respect and have affection for.
And you trust.
And whose criticism you trust. You absolutely trust. So their criticism doesn't hit you at your weakest points and doesn't make your pride act up.
Because the critique isn't intended to do that. The critique is intended to make the thing you're doing better than it currently is.
Yeah. And I really love that you brought this up, Saya, because I think it's no accident that, we have a lot of these really famous and well-respected and highly regarded storytelling teams that people follow from project to project in the K-drama industry and outside of it. Like you have Kim Un-suk and that director that she loves to work with, whose name is escaping me right now. Yes. Or there's, like the Hong sisters, some of them are writer-director teams like Yoo Jung and Shin Won-ho have done so many projects together. And by this point, they're basically a brand.
And they even have a stable of their actors, of the people that they like to work with.
And, and we also have these stories that have come out of, in Hollywood, for example, you have the Coen brothers, the Wachowski sisters, like Key and Peele. Like, you have these teams of people who like just have this amazing synergy when they get together. And then sometimes you see one of them do a project alone and you're like,
yeah,
oh, yeah. The same. And then you have these stories also of like these disastrous projects. And then like 3 or 4 years, or like something that's like so bad, and then 3 or 4 years later you hear about like the behind the scenes drama between people who like didn't get along, or they had really bad, very different creative visions, and they were butting heads, or there were too much ego happen. It's like, so that's a really interesting aspect of like, even though we're talking about writers, and talking about writers can often be such this one person is such a good writer, but like it's really important to remember that with a medium like television, it's always going to be a team effort. And so like, if you don't have the rest of the team who's kind of there to not only support the writing, but even like make the writing happen in a like a creative and like a, when the magic is there, like that's a team effort. It can't happen alone.
Well, while I agree that having like a set creative team of different types of talents together is very crucial to getting a success formula going. And we have all of the examples you enumerated, they totally work. I think the special thing about the Hong sisters, though, is that critique of writing is not really transferable when you're talking about a writer-director team working together. Directors will often not give the level of or the kind of critique that a writer needs to understand how to better her, the flow of her writing. The reason I bring up this is because the Hong sisters haven't just had 1 or 2 successes. Every alternate drama pretty much of theirs, and at one point every single drama they had was just like the nation's biggest success since their last drama. And even right now, Alchemy of Souls like broke certain number of records. It's every time they do something together and they've just been told that, hey, I don't think, for instance, Greatest Love, right before Greatest Love, they were going through a slump, and they were basically being, and this is like more than 10 years ago, and they were being told, hey, maybe, you've had your big successes. And then they bring it up with Greatest Love. And they chose a topic nobody thought, and because idol dramas tend to do really badly, and especially in that period, what they wanted to do was base these 2 characters in an industry that people didn't seem to watch content out of. Like, they didn't want to watch content about actors. But that worked. And amazingly,
Yeah.
I think they have the biggest quote unquote idol drama, that is You're Beautiful, success in K-drama history. They just managed to, the writing, they just managed to do something utterly magical that almost always seems to break like previous conceptions of what could be done, like boundaries. I don't know another writing team that works this well together.
There's also that sort of kernel of emotional truth that makes a drama work, regardless of its like the level of its concept, right? Like, if there's something in there that is real, that you can you feel something about, like, I mean, Happiness, that is in no way like a drama. Like, it's very high concept, but and it's like I don't want to say zombies. I hate saying zombies, but I'm gonna say zombies. Like, it's got zombies, and I hate zombies. But the way that drama was packaged as a character study was what made it really outstanding.
I agree.
And
so much.
I'm just going to the writer of Happiness as well, who's the Han Sang-un, I think, the same writer as Watcher. It's the same thing. Although their external sort of the genre presentation is something like, like it's a thriller, it's a post-apocalyptic. I don't even know what you call it. It's not what it was. What it was is this very intense study of the relationships between people and how they relate to each other. It really went deep into people's peopleness.
So Philly Jones says that I didn't feel like the writing was as strong in Alchemy of Souls. And here's the thing, I'm not saying that in objective, universal terms, the writing of any of these dramas have to resonate with the audience. But the reason I am praising the Hong sisters so much is because they tend to be able to tap into what the conscience of like their main audience, which is South Koreans, their main audience in their head, I have read in interviews, is never the international audience, no matter where Hallyu is going. They address their stories to their domestic audience first. So even if it doesn't translate uniquely to people, and I wouldn't actually say Alchemy of Souls is their best work. Not by far, even though, again, huge fantasy nut here. However, there are certain things in that drama that just work so well. And I can see exactly why it became the hit that it became. And, but again, like I said, if you didn't find their writing strong, you said that you didn't, Philly John also says that she couldn't get past episode 4 of Hotel Del Luna. That's also perfectly possible. It was actually a pretty slow start.
Can I say how to watch that drama is what I loved it, but I watched it at 1.4 speed. It was unbearable at its normal speed.
I can believe it. Because the first, I think 6-7 episodes of Hotel Del Luna were relatively slow. They
were all really slow.
The way up. No, they were. No, I will not take that from you, Saya. That's a drama I love. But to come back to what you were saying, to add on to your previous point about the mixture of genres, this is another huge strength. Like one of the biggest strengths of K-dramas is concept. The second strength in my head is the formula that they have created for specific genres and how well they don't just stick to it, but play with it. Like if they have their rule A, B, C, D, they know how to do like A2, C3.
Like they extend the what if question to sort of leap from genre to genre. Like, what if you crossed a zombie thriller with a rom-com?
That is their final. That is like the like in the trifecta. That is the final thing that they're amazing at. There is concept. There is like formula that they just know how to play with, and mixing of genres. Mixing of genres, not just mixing. Mixing makes it sound crude.
No, I call it genre blend.
Like, of sort of a fluid coming together of different worlds of storytelling.
Like a zebra, but better.
So much better. It's this kind of like color blend is just amazing. And you never feel the shock because the formulas just work together so very well. I often find that even though people say that romance is like the primary thing that K-dramas are about, or the romantic dramas are the ones that do best, I don't really think K-dramas have a romantic genre. They have a drama genre with a romantic subplot. They have crime genres with romantic subplot. They have thriller, young adult, any number of romance is always a subplot.
Yeah, it's like at varying levels of intensity, but I don't think I think my boss at work recently left and went to another company, and she was incredible. Like, she's the woman who hired me. We're all sad that she's gone. And one of my coworkers said that she used to bring a spirit of abundance to everything. Like she just had an attitude of like, why can't we do that? Yes, let's do it. And I think that Korean dramas have that spirit of abundance. They're like, should we leave romance out? It's like one of the, love is such a big part of everyone's life. There's no reason to not include it. Like, there's no reason to not include all these things together in the same drama. Like, why does it have to be one thing when it could be all the things? And I love that. Like hybridity and like flexibility and like just openness to everything that the world contains is one of the things that I love about Korean media. Not just dramas, like K-pop does this, movies do this, other types of music do this, not just K-pop. It's just like so, I don't know, there's something really freeing about it. Like, I don't have to be in a box.
And to just add to the whole Hong sisters conversation as well, and the genre blend, K-dramas have always been really ambitious in their concept, even if they were like low budget dramas or whatever. Like they always set out to be more ambitious than you expect. And Hung Sisters, again, this is something that they really excel in, is lately, because you can see in their earlier dramas that they are sort of treading in known genre territory. But like in their more recent ones, they have been stepping into like completely into dramas that require completely fresh world building. For example, Alchemy of Souls. For example, Hotel de Luna. For example, the Isengi one. I can't remember what it's called. But the person who always comes to mind for me. That's right. The person who always comes to mind for me when we talk about like high concept and ambitious dramas is Song Jae-jung. You knew that was coming, right? And the thing with Song Jae-jung is, and we've said this a lot in all of our previous, like, anytime we've touched on her dramas or talked about writing, is that she will come with this brilliant concept and it's just like nobody's thought of this before. She's the first one to go there. And it goes so well. Until like until it doesn't. Yeah. But you gotta love the ambition. And also, I didn't realize this, but Song Jae-jung is also like behind Yumi Cells, but with a group of writers, right?
Yes.
Like she's a co-writer.
Yeah, so let's just mention some of her credits.
Two Worlds,
Memory of the Alhambra.
Memories of the Alhambra. There must have been. There's more.
Nine.
Yes.
Time
also,
travels.
Coffee House. Yeah.
Have any of us watched that?
Yeah.
I watched a bit.
Oh, okay.
I watched half.
I started at Queen Inyan's Men and I've watched everything. At least I haven't watched Yumi Cells, and I watched an episode of Three Musketeers, but I've kind of sworn off her since Memories of the Alhambra. But I was actually really surprised just now when I clicked into her page and she like Yumi Cells, and you love that Burma. But she's got co-writers.
Hi. Sorry, thanks for erasing me. I also love that show.
Anissa loves it a lot. I don't know if she's watched the second season though.
I have not yet.
Your love grades have fallen. But I should mention.
It's not that. I just don't have time.
I'm so sorry. Yumi Cells is not an original work. It's not her original story. It's based
an adaptation.
off webtoons. So the story is already there. She's adapting basically a vast number of works, like making it more concise. Potentially there is a third season coming. However, the weaknesses of her writing already showed up in the second season, especially in the second half of the second season, because she has diverted away from the original text somewhat, because she's trying to, she's not doing her own thing.
Didn't we send her the memo?
But, she was basically asked to, it's a very long running series, so they're trying to sort of like make it more concise. So she had to divert away certain character traits and like blend stuff.
I thought she was going to do a Kim and Suk and just be like saved from her flaws with co-writers.
No. But in the first season, everything was almost completely perfect.
This is where part 1 has to end, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in to next week's episode when we talk about more K-drama writers and our live stream audience pitch in with their own thoughts on writing in Korean dramas.